Good morning. Welcome to Fantasy Sports Today on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish, along with George Kurtz, getting you ready for the final week of the regular season in football and in fantasy football. And George, it's great to be with you once again. Happy New Year. Happy 2025. We've come to the end of the line here. I would imagine most folks today are taking that pause before maybe some DFS football or maybe some playoff fantasy football. I cannot imagine people are playing for their championship this week. I'm going to imagine that we're going to say congratulations to those people who have been watching us all season, and hopefully we helped you a little bit to win a fantasy championship last week.
Yeah, if you're in any kind of head-to-head league, I would hope it's over. And like I said, maybe playing something today for fun, whatever it might be. But I would hope it's over. My points league, my home league points league is still going. It's I said points league, so I am 9 points out of first, Craig. So I will sweat out what later on today and tomorrow has to bring for us here. So other than that, it should be over. You mentioned DFS now picks up more. Whatever kind of in-games you got. Do you play fantasy during the playoffs in those playoff leagues? I know there are a lot of weird rule leagues they have there.
Yeah, I used to. I used to play a lot of it, excuse me, when I worked over at SiriusXM full-time. We used to play those one-and-done fantasy leagues where everybody has the same opportunity to take the pool, and then you could just pick one player, and then you can't pick them again. But, George, I would tell you that, and I worked for SiriusXM directly for almost 10 years. I think it was 9 years and a half. But it was super popular the first 3 or 4 years I worked at SiriusXM. The second DFS came, I feel like we stopped doing the league. Like we stopped playing it, and everybody just started playing fantasy. But I think it's a fun way to engage in fantasy and to keep going because it's like Survivor and incorporates a lot of strategy. A lot of the websites do it now as well. But I haven't done it in a number of years. Usually what's happening for me is that, of course, we have sports betting to talk about so much, and I think we'll do that today on the show as well. And then naturally, let's keep it real, George. I mean, I'm starting to move to fantasy baseball a little bit too. So, that's kind of where my focus goes.
I'm the same exact way. I said the playoff leagues were fun, but I'd rather put my attention towards DFS. Or if I'm obviously gambling is probably where I go even more than DFS now. Why do I want to beat, I don't know, 100 other people, 200 other people? I just got to beat the books. Just got to beat the number. So that's generally what I do as well here. And as you said, fantasy baseball definitely does pick up. Now it's like calendar turns, next. And for me, baseball is what's next.
Yeah, it's coming soon, and more free agents signed. And George and I, in a few weeks, will start diving in deeper into fantasy baseball as well. For now, let's get to our top stories here as we begin the show here on this Saturday. Thanks for waking up with us this morning. Pro Bowl rosters come out. They're going to play this game in Orlando once again this year. No Mahomes for the first time, I believe, in 8 years or 7 years, something like that. He not on the team. The Ravens, a lot of players made that. The New York Jets began their search for a new coach. Ron Rivera is a name that's been brought up. Mike Vrabel interviewed, maybe even Rex Ryan going to interview as well. And George, the biggest game of the week, no question, Sunday Night Football. I think the NFL is content, I would say, with getting this game on Sunday night between the Vikings and Lions for a couple of reasons. The first is, yes, there is something at stake. It is the division. Secondly, it's the highest total in the NFL, one of the highest all season long at 56.5. But I have to say, I think if the NFL had to, and you put them in a room and secretly said, hey, do you prefer this? I don't think so. I think they would have preferred to have a you're in, you're out scenario. That just no scenario carried out that way in the NFL this season. So it's division winner take all this year.
It's also number one seed take all. So, you're right. They'd rather have two teams, hey, one's going in, one's going home. But still, this game, they'll play this game full on, right? Both teams want that number one seed here. It should be a fun game, to put it nicely. Personally, Craig, I think we're going to see what we saw Monday night. I think Detroit can score points almost at will, but they can't stop anybody. And, if Minnesota doesn't make mistakes, the Brock Purdy 2 interceptions Monday night sort of sunk San Fran. If Minnesota doesn't do that, they'll win the game. That's the way I look at it here. I think it's a game where all your props are going to come in. If you're fantasy-wise, everybody goes. Like I said, everybody's valuable in this game. So I think we're going to get a lot of points. We have a fun game Sunday night. One of the few games that, let's face it, is it the only game where a game means something to both teams as far as on the plus side? I'm looking at it now. What other game means to both? I think it is the only game where to both teams.
I think we could have one game today. It's possible that Cincinnati and Cincinnati playing to get in. and Pittsburgh playing for a better seed. I think that is a possible scenario. You're right, though.
Only
I'm
if
not going to.
Baltimore
That's
loses,
stretching.
right? They Baltimore would have to
Uh,
lose the early game for it to
no,
really
no,
mean
no.
something
Well,
to Pittsburgh.
no, I don't think so. I think that you're underestimating that a little bit. I think Baltimore plays later today, and of course we have Pro Football Today, so we have you covered. But I think if Baltimore wins today, it puts the Steelers in a scenario to ask themselves the question, would you rather go play at Baltimore or Houston? I think that's important, George. I think that the Steelers could easily
I think it's
beat the Texans, and I don't think they're going to beat the Ravens. So I think that they are playing for something today. I do. Again, I'm different maybe than most. I understand they're dogs. Second half of that game, Cincinnati's up 21-0. Everybody's sitting. I don't think they're going to play to come back. So to me, that's the only other one. But, the other thing that I would say, George, is that, and you've been at this a long time, and so have I, and from a betting perspective, props, fantasy, we know a lot of the incentives are out there. We'll go through some of it a little bit later. We know we're going to talk about the Jets here a little bit. Aaron Rodgers going for 500 touchdown passes. But do you think that it has anything to do with sports betting, the fact that we know everybody who's playing and not this week, George? Like, there used to be a lot of mystery going into Saturday and Sunday and not really knowing. Do you remember the games that McDermott used to play and McVay used to play? They came out during the week and said, we're sitting guys. I don't remember that happening for a long time. I've always thought that we just weren't really sure. You could start getting ahead of some of the numbers in sports betting and DFS, get some better pricing on players. Not really the case this week.
I think sports betting has put a lot more pressure on them to announce it. All right. Some are not going to care. Yeah, they're not going to care anyway. I think there's a lot more pressure on these coaches because the fans want to know. If you don't want to know, you're going to hear it on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is. Right? People are going to be all over you telling you it's your fault that I didn't win money or that I lost money, that I did this because I didn't know that Josh Allen's only going to play a series today or only going to play a couple of snaps today. And I didn't know Cooper Kupp was going to be out and all this other stuff today. So, yeah, I think there's a lot more pressure on these coaches to announce what it is. Like I said, some will tell you, some won't. So we're not going to care here. So, hey, it's good. It's a good thing, right? I like knowing. Week 18 is hard, because even the guys who are going to play, are they going to be pulled at halftime? I mean, just because they tell you they're going to play the full game. Like Tomlin today, I believe, is going to play his guys full game. But what if it is, what'd you say, 21-0? What if it is 21-0? All right, we're not going to win anyway. The only reason I was playing these guys is I wanted to break the losing streak, and he decides to pull them halfway through the third quarter. And that could ruin some prop bets for us and stuff like that.
Yeah, I just don't recall a scenario where we even heard that Josh Allen's going to play a series and Mahomes is definitely out and like things like that. Like we used to go into the weekend not really knowing. I feel like if you did any due diligence on any of your props and sports betting, you may not get it right, but at least you'll know the scenario going in. Speaking of the Jets, they're interviewing coaches. Does it matter who the Jets head coach is, George? I feel like whoever gets this job is just holding down the fort for the next 2 years of 4 and 5 wins. And we'll see the end of the losing. I don't know. That's the way I view it here. It's a holdover coach.
I mean, Woody Johnson's the owner's got to stay out of it, right? I have no idea of those reports that came out a month ago, if they're true or not true. But if they are true, that's certainly not good. I mean, they've got talent there. I mean, they do have talent there. Are they going to have a division next year? No, I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. It's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. All right, so they've got. I think until we answer this question, you know how this team's going to be, how it's going to be set, who's going to be leading this team, who's going to be the quarterback, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner. The defense should be better here. I think it's a decent job. I do. Not the best job that's out there. There could be 8 or 9 job openings, but I think it's a decent job, Craig.
Yeah, I would agree. Normally we don't do a ton of basketball or baseball this time of year, but if you are waking up this morning and you have Jimmy Butler on your fantasy basketball team, folks, he's been suspended for 7 games. Get him out of your lineup for just waking up. We'll be right back.
They let the guy run the practice and leave the building, have a press conference, and then you fire him on a cell phone call while he's in the car. Shame on you, Sacramento. You haven't been good since Chris Webber, White Chocolate, Lottie Divac, Corliss Big Nasty Williamson. and obviously Rick Alleman as a coach. No one wonder why you've been a joke for the last quarter century.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Week 18 of the fantasy football season is here. For those of you getting ready to lock into next year's fantasy football season, you're insane, but that's okay. We're all a little insane here to wake up this early and talk fantasy football with you here on SportsGrid. So let's get right to it as we dive into some decisions that may have to be made based on the fantasy point outcomes of players at the same position going into next year. So George and I are back with that. Let's start off with the most valuable player award. It's a three-team race, basically, right? Three-player race, excuse me. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow. We're not going to pull the Joe Burrow card just yet. By the way, Joe Burrow is going to add to his fantasy point total today. He's going to be one of the few that we know that's going to do that. But Lamar Jackson, his fantasy point season is at 411.4 fantasy points. Naturally, there's a chance we see some of Lamar Jackson coming up today at 4:30 Eastern, followed by Josh Allen, who we think is done for the year. He got 385 fantasy points. George, if you ask the average person who had the better year between these two, you ask 10 people who play fantasy football, I think you'd get 6 or 7 that say, oh, Josh Allen definitely had a better fantasy season. He did not. It was actually Lamar Jackson who did. And it just goes to show you, I know Josh Allen's going to win the MVP. And if Lamar had never won an MVP, I think he would win the MVP. But because he's won it before, they're going to give it to somebody else. It's always the way that works. But clearly going into next year, you're going to have to make a choice between one of these two. And I think these two, along with Jalen Hurts, are your top 3 fantasy quarterbacks going into next season. But I do think there's a huge distinction between this tier by itself with Jackson and Allen. And then I think Hurts maybe in a tier by himself as the third best. And then a lot of other guys. Who do you want between these two if you have your shot?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you about the rankings. Well, I think Jaden Daniels is going to make some if Washington makes moves here, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be another guy who might be in a tier by himself, right behind Hurts. So Burrow's in there as well, but we don't know where T. Higgins is going to end up with, and that'll certainly hurt. I agree with you about your assessment, by the way. Josh Allen's going to win MVP, even though Lamar Jackson's numbers are better across the board, pretty much. So he actually has been technically the better quarterback, but it's going to be Josh Allen because he hasn't won the award yet, and that is how they vote for it. Let's face it. If I had a choice between these two, and I don't think I'm going to have one, I played a bunch of super flex leagues, but I don't have the first pick in any of those. I know where I'm picking already. I'm probably going with Lamar Jackson. He's become a better passer over the past couple of years, right? And I get a little bit worried. Baltimore has a history of though they don't help the passing game all that much. It's not their free agency here. Mark Andrews is getting old. I don't know how much more we can rely on him. Sort of got lucky the second half of the season. Derrick Henry does steal those touchdowns now, so that's an issue as well here. I don't think you can go wrong with either one here, but right now, I am going with Lamar Jackson 1, Josh Allen 2.
Okay. And look, I don't think anybody would argue with either side. Jalen Hurts, 320 fantasy points on the season. We mentioned him as 3. He did not outscore Jared Goff, who had 325 fantasy points. Keep in mind, Hurts missed a game. Goff will also play Sunday night, and it'll look much different at the end of the season for those of you looking at rankings for next year, because Goff's going to put up another 20 or 30, I would guess, against the Vikings. I got to tell you, like, George Goff really, to me, was super impressive. Like, even in a season where he didn't run the ball at all, and in a season where Burrow is, no one talks about Goff, everyone talks about Burrow. If I went into next year as Goff as my QB1, I have zero problem with that whatsoever. I don't care if Ben Johnson's there or not. The Lions offense still going to be dynamic. I want Hurts over Goff, let me be clear. But I'm just saying, like, Goff is a great consolation prize if you don't get one of the first 4 or 5 quarterbacks. He's in my top 10 next year.
Your last line is where I'm at, right? He's in my top 10. And he's probably much better than top 10, by the way. I could probably go top 8, but I'm taking Jackson. I'm taking Allen. All right, I'm taking Burrow. I'm taking Hurts. I'm taking Daniels. Right now, it's still on the top of my head. All right, so now he's at 6 at best here. So obviously, I'm taking. I'm not taking Goff over. I think it was Hurts, right? You and I both have Hurts pretty much at 3 here. And the reason those numbers are close, by the way, is Hurts not going to play Sunday. Missed one game, and he pretty much missed all of another game too. That Washington game, he only played the first series, right, before he got hurt. So he's missed 3. He's going to miss 3 games. For all intents and purposes there. Goff's had a fantastic season. The other reason I wouldn't take Goff high is because Jahmyr Gibbs is too damn good. All right, he's stealing touchdowns. All right, they don't need Goff to throw 40 touchdown passes because Gibbs is going to run a whole bunch of it. Montgomery, assuming he's there next year, going to run a whole bunch in here. This is how this team is made. So listen, Goff, he's definitely better than I thought he would be going to Detroit here, and as you said, I would have no problem with my quarterback 1 in a 1 quarterback league, but I'm not taking him over Hurts, no.
36 touchdown passes for Goff this season. Incredible. Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, these are the consolation prizes right outside the top 12. People would be surprised with the season that Justin Herbert had that he fell below Kyler Murray, probably because of the rushing yards. 280.5 for Murray, 260.2 for Herbert. We talked about that on the show last week. One of my favorite games was Arizona. Arizona did end up covering that game like I thought they would, but they didn't even score, man. That's not the way that I thought that game was going to go at all. I'm not sure what to make of Murray over the course of his career. If you told me Herbert did this exactly the same next year, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think Kyler Murray had a very disappointing year. And it's funny, Craig, because you look at the final numbers, he's going to end up being a top 10 fantasy quarterback. I think right now he's 8 or 9. So he's going to squeeze in there, but I expected more. He's not running. Not as much as he should. They don't design runs for him. It's almost like he said, I don't want to run. I don't want those design runs. I'll run when I have to out of the pocket, when it breaks down, but he's not running enough really because he should be, in my mind, just outside of the top guys, right? Just outside. And instead he's, more of a bottom top 10 in that 8 to 12 range. And I expect more from him. That being said, I'm probably taking him over Herbert as of right now. I don't know what the Chargers are going to do as far as helping the receiving core there. So I need to see that. But right now, as it stands, I would still take Murray. I think there's just more upside with him.
Another surprise that people may have is the running back position. So George and I will dive into a couple of either ors, this or that's, however you want to call it. You're watching Fantasy Sports today on SportsGrid. Happy New Year. We're back after these messages. Don't go away.
They let the guy run the practice and leave the building, have a press conference, and then you fire him on a cell phone call while he's in the car. Shame on you, Sacramento. You haven't been good since Chris Webber, White Chocolate, Vlade Divac, Corliss Big Nasty Williamson. and obviously Rick Alleman as a coach. No one wonder why you've been a joke for the last quarter century.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
An early look at the output of fantasy scoring this year and making some early decisions on next year, although we don't have to make these for a long time. Craig Mish, George Kurtz back with you on Fantasy Sports today. First game of the day coming up a little bit later, Browns and Ravens. All right, running backs, George. I think some people would be surprised to see these numbers. Bijan Robinson, who finally had that season that we were waiting for, kind of. I mean, he didn't have a Saquon Barkley year. I think people expected that eventually out of him, like 2,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. So he didn't have that. He outscored Derrick Henry, 310 to 306 in, I got to tell you, George, one of the more quiet running back fantasy seasons of a player that's established himself as a top-tier running back in the National Football League.
Yeah, Henry's had a quiet second half or second third, right? Hasn't gotten all those touchdowns that he did get in the first half there for whatever reason. Next year he'll be another year older, right? So I don't mind having Derrick Henry next year. I don't, but I'm gonna go with Bijan. Bijan's also the more well-rounded back. He'll catch balls out of the backfield. He'll still help you out in PPR. Now I do worry a little bit, Craig, about Penix. You know, pretty much a rookie quarterback who have made 3 starts, counting tomorrow. There, so you know, I do believe Penix is the guy. I do believe that's what I'm going with. If I didn't think he was the guy, this would be a mess. Right, I wouldn't want Bijan because they're going to put 9,000 guys in the box to stop him. But I think Penix is that threat where he can get the ball down the field, back those safeties up here. So I'm going to go Bijan here over Henry, but this is somewhat close to me. But the second half swoon, and swoon's probably too tough a word here. The second and a half slowdown for Henry definitely affects my opinion on this. I'll take Bijan.
Yeah, and you wonder if they've been saving him for the playoffs. I guess we're going to find out coming up next week. All right, at running back also on the other tier of things, maybe solid late RB1s, more or less RB2s, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills, and then Chase Brown, who I don't know that we can necessarily answer the question to what if Zach Moss wasn't there for the first 8 games, whatever it was. I don't know that we can answer that because sometimes, George, there are running backs that definitively step up in spots where they're the clear-cut guy. Chase Brown was fantastic once Moss was not in the equation, but I just don't know over a 17-game season if Brown can be that guy next year. I kind of know what Cook is, but the other thing, too, that I would wonder, George, is that would Cincinnati bring in someone else next year? Because I would not sense that Moss comes back to tandem with Brown.
The other problem here is we know Josh Allen steals so many touchdowns, and Cook's had a great season. The knock on Cook was that he couldn't get into the end zone. This year he proved he can. All right, and Buffalo's had that fantastic season here. This is close. I mean, this really is close. I don't know how much I truly believe in Chase Brown, or if he's just a product of the fact that Brown, you can do what you want. We got to worry about Chase. We got to worry about Higgins, and about the fantastic season that Burrow's had. Of course, he might have a fantastic season next season also, with or without T. Higgins there. This is close. Like I said, I think we can argue with either one here. I'm gonna go with Cook. Give me Cook.
Okay. Finally, let's get to Tony Pollard, Najee Harris. Harris finally delivered some fantasy points this season. I know people were like ready to jump off with him, and Jaylen Warren's good. Don't get it twisted here, but Harris finally had an okay season. 189 fantasy points. Tony Pollard seemed to be on the injury report every week playing through it. 194 fantasy points. I guess my optimism here and my choice for Pollard would be, George, is that the quarterbacking can't get much worse. So knowing that going into next year, you would assume that more defenses will be targeted toward the wide receivers and such. I mean, between Levis and Rudolph, it was a horrible quarterback season for them.
Well, you can make an argument here that, let's just say for giggles, Pittsburgh falls apart. All right, they lose tomorrow, they lose next week. Is Russell back next year?
I don't know.
Levis isn't the quarterback for Tennessee. Both these teams might have brand new starting quarterbacks. All right, and that could Tennessee will almost certainly draft a quarterback, right? So that could change things around. You got Warren there who's competing. Maybe Pittsburgh goes in a different direction. Pollard, we know, signed the contract. He'll be there with Spears. I'm going to go Pollard. I don't really love either one here, but I'm going to go Pollard. I keep going with this or over that. So I'm going to go Pollard. These are both running back twos here for me. So give me Pollard. But if you wanted to convince me that I should take Harris, I would certainly listen.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Tennessee does this week, by the way, too. A lot of people like them this week to win, which would push them back several spots. And they have a shot at the number 2 overall pick in the draft. So I don't know which way that's going to go. All right, we'll take a quick time out here on the program. We'll dive into some tight end decisions and continue on here on this Week 18 edition of Fantasy Sports Today. Don't go away.
They let the guy run the practice and leave the building, have a press conference, and then you fire him on a cell phone call while he's in the car. Shame on you, Sacramento. You haven't been good since Chris Webber, White Chocolate, Vlade Divac, Corliss Big Nasty Williamson, and obviously Rick Alleman as a coach. No one wonder why you've been a joke for the last quarter century.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today on SportsGrid. I'm Craig Mish along with George Kurtz as we got you here ready for Week 18 of the fantasy football season. Let's touch on some tight ends for next year, a little this or that. Let's take a look at George Kittle versus Trey McBride. I don't think that the numbers tell the story at all this season. I could make the case, George, that the most unlucky player in fantasy football season was Trey McBride. I mean, this is the biggest slam dunk for me of all, given the fact that the points are so close. I'm a George Kittle guy. Okay, he's on my team. He'll be back on my team next year on my Dynasty League team. But this is a slam dunk for me. McBride should have had at least 4 or 5 touchdowns this season. He ended up getting, what did he get, 1 or 2 at the end of the year? 1 at the end of the season. Come on. Give me the guy on the right. Not even close.
Well, technically he had 3. He had 1 receiving touchdown. He had 1 bounce off his head last week. Because Kyler Murray threw it too soon. I'm with you. All right, McBride. And Kittle's had a great year, and I'm sure he'll be a top 6, top 7 tight end next year as well here. But McBride has the upside here of being maybe just maybe only Brock Bowers beats him next year. So give me
I was
McBride.
Gonna say, yeah. I was gonna say I think he's the second best tight end in fantasy. I was trying to think like who could potentially be ahead of him. But it's those 3.
Can we Dalton Kincaid?
No, definitely no, not your guy, Dalton Kincaid. All right,
So
Sam Laporta, meanwhile, this is another tight end I would bet on. I would bet on him next season. I mean, he had a really down year just because the Lions offense sort of expanded outward and not inward, and Laporta got a lot less targets. Travis Kelce keeps doing it. He's not the number 1 tight end in fantasy or number 2 or maybe even number 3. I think next year will be the lowest, George, that he gets drafted ever in fantasy. My guess he's probably, what would you say, like 5th round, 6th round next year for Kelce? Well, 195 points, Laporta 161. This is probably closer than I'm making it out to be, I'm going to guess. I'll want your opinion on that one.
I am pretty much, the first thing I thought was 5th round. Right, that's the first thing that came to my head, 5th round, when you started going through that. So, yeah, I think that's where he's going to be. Once again, still a solid tight end, but it's no longer, should we take Kelce round 1 because you get such a big advantage? No, he's not that guy anymore. You certainly want Bowers over him. We already discussed you want McBride over him. I think he's in the argument after that. All right, do you want, Laporte, we're bringing up here, who's very good here. You mentioned earlier, though, no Ben Johnson. I do expect Ben Johnson to get a head coaching job. He probably could have got one last year if he wanted. It just depends. Does he feel the time is right to leave Detroit for that head coaching job? Is there the right job out there for him? Only he can answer that question truly here. So they're sort of in the mishmash now. I'm no longer looking to get Kelce. He's another year older again. That being said, I said that this year. And he's had a pretty solid season here. Kelce, Laporta, I'm going to go Kelce. I'll give it to the old guy here. I didn't give it for Derrick Henry, but I'll give it to the old guy in Kelce here. Until he saw proves me that he can't do it. He's just too good. And then the receiving core should be better next year, so maybe all the attention is not paid to him as well. But I do love Laporta also.
By the way, Bowers, real quick. I'm going to guess not a first-round pick in fantasy. Will he be a second-round pick, George, next year? Is that a slam dunk that Bowers is a second-round pick? What do you think?
New quarterback next year, right? It's not going to be Minshew. It's not going to be O'Connell. It's not going to be Ritt. It could be. It better be. It could be a new coach too, right? I think everything is gone there. I mean, I was saying round 3 in my head, and it could be top of round 3. So we're talking 4 or 5. Me personally, he's not good enough. Not as I've seen. Not with the offense. For me to give him a second-round pick. No, I'm going to need that top wide receiver, top running back for my team. So I'm going to say no, but I'm not knocking anybody who does it.
Right, probably back end 2, early 3. Okay, real quick, let's go to the wide receivers. All right, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, St. Brown. Jefferson, fantastic all season long. Amon-Ra, St. Brown, fantastic all season long. This is a tough one, man. Gosh, you know what I would say is that I could see the same exact results next season, and I can't predict who's going to get hurt and not, and who's going to miss games. But Jefferson, to me, just seems to have that big playability. And if you're playing in a fantasy league, George, where a 50-yard touchdown gives you an extra point or something like that, like it's a no-brainer. This is standard leagues. We're talking about what happened this past year, but I probably would just take Jefferson. I don't know why. He's like Amon-Ra St. Brown catches probably more passes. He's over the middle. There really isn't a second guy. Although I will say Jameson Williams really come on for that team. I'll still take Jefferson, though.
I'm with you. I'll take JJ is my number 1 wide receiver next year. I'm on St. Brown 4. And listen, they're both first round picks here. CeeDee Lamb's in here, and so is Jamar Chase. So they're all great. All right, and I'm not complaining about any of them here. Jameson Williams, though, I think is a problem because he is the deep guy. All right, he is that deep guy. He is coming along. Oh, he looks like he's going to be a really good wide receiver. Finally figured it out over the torn ACL that he suffered, I want to say, in the Sugar Bowl a few years back for Alabama. So, he looks good. Love St. Brown. He's on my team now that's playing tomorrow. I need a touchdown or two, buddy. Remember, I'm 9 points behind, okay? So let's go. But I'm taking JJ first.
All right, two receivers who emerged in the second half of the season. Actually, you'll probably see Neighbors emerge in the first half of the season, so let me correct myself there. But we got Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors. You're not going to find many receivers over the last 5 weeks that were better than Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that was without Trevor Lawrence. So I guess let's dive deeper into that. Is there a chance that Brian Thomas Jr. is this rock-solid wide receiver one going into next year? I think probably people feel that Neighbors will be. And again, we could say the same thing about him. He did not have a quarterback, too.
The Mac Jones is just weird. All right, Thomas was not this good with Lawrence. Lawrence wasn't very good. All right, but Lawrence is going to be a starting quarterback next year. All right, so I don't know what to make of that. Does he reap? And there'll be new head coach as well. Both these guys have new head coaches, probably new OCs. So it's a weird situation. I think right now I'm taking Neighbors. It's somewhat close, but I think I would take Neighbors over Thomas, mainly because Neighbors has done it with crap. All right, it's just there's nothing there. Jones, Locke, Boyle. I know I let those Tommy Cutlets. It's just ugly. They don't have a starting quarterback there. They're both likely to have rookie quarterbacks. And the Giants with rookie quarterback, Jacksonville with Lawrence. It's close. It's gonna worry me somewhat who the rookie quarterback is for the Giants. And then the Giants are gonna beat Philadelphia tomorrow. They're gonna go from the number one pick, right, to like 8th.
You think so?
I think Philadelphia's not playing anybody. They're playing an 8th string quarterback because they've just been.
Giants not going to blow this one.
Giants to win. They want the Giants to win. Giants
I
quarterback? No, you don't get a quarterback. Giants, no, you don't. I think they like the 7th or 8th pick and just get screwed over completely. And Giant fans are going to go ballistic. Now you win game. It's just great. So I think they're going to screw themselves out of that. I think Kirk Cousins might be the quarterback for the Giants next year.
Wow. Kirk Cousins just got the money and now gets to leave. All right, let's go Terry McLaurin, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. McLaurin, if you take out McLaurin's, I think, first 2 weeks of the fantasy football season, he is one of the very best in all of fantasy football. Remember, they were saying that, Daniels is not going to be able to hook up with McLaurin, and then he was amazing the rest of the year. Jackson Smith and Jigba's numbers, I think, are going to go up significantly. I don't know where Metcalf factors in with Seattle next year, but JSN to me is going to be their number one guy, and he emerged as that at the end of the year. This is actually a really tough one for me, George. This is close.
I was thinking the same thing. Kudos to Sam, our man behind the glass, for putting these two together. This one's not easy. It's funny, if you would have put DK Metcalf there instead of McLaurin, easy, McLaurin. I don't know what happened with DK this year, but he just wasn't very good. Maybe there's an injury that we don't know about. But JSN really took it over here. I do expect Washington, Craig, to add another significant receiver through a draft, free agency, whatever it might be. They're going to build around Jaden Daniels and give him what he needs to truly succeed here. I'm going to go with McLaurin here. I just trust Daniels more than I trust Geno Smith, but JSN has looked great the second half of the season. But give me McLaurin. I think he takes that next step along with Jaden Daniels. I don't know why I keep saying McDaniels.
Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, both coming to the end of their careers, but you would guess that they both have at least a couple of years left. Evans, a Hall of Famer without a doubt. I would have backed off Adams, George, had I not seen the last few weeks. He's been fantastic. I probably would take Adams, not even knowing where he's going next year.
I'll take Evans. I know he's with Mayfield here. This is an easy choice for me, Evans. Don't know where Adams ends up.
All right, we'll continue our debate. Up next, you're watching Fantasy Sports Today on SportsGrid.
They let the guy run the practice and leave the building, have a press conference, and then you fire him on a cell phone call while he's in the car. Shame on you, Sacramento. You haven't been good since Chris Webber. White Chocolate, Lottie Divac, Corliss Big Nasty Williamson, and obviously Rick Alleman as a coach. No one wonder why you've been a joke for the last quarter century.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to Fantasy Sports today on SportsGrid. Just recapping some of the things that happened during the regular season of fantasy football and making some early decisions for next year. That's what George and I are doing. Happy New Year. Games coming up today, 4:30 Eastern. Of course, the Bailey Zappi era begins in Cleveland as they take on the Baltimore Ravens. Crazy that Bailey Zappi is back in the NFL. All right, so A.J. Brown, let's play wide receiver this or that. A.J. Brown, T. Higgins. Higgins was the star of the fantasy football championship for a lot of people last week, scoring a bunch of touchdowns. A frustrating fantasy player, to say the least. And, George, I would say this. If we played this game last week, okay, between these two players, and this was 1 week ago, would you have taken T. Higgins over A.J. Brown? Because that's what's making this look closer than it is.
I mean, my problem with T. Higgins is, you already said it, right? He's hurt a lot. He's on a whole bunch of my fantasy teams this year, or was on a whole bunch of my fantasy teams. I am a believer in his talent. Love his talent. But, I mean, he's a frustrating player, Craig. Because even when when he plays, he's questionable. You always, okay, what if he doesn't go here? He's that guy you got to watch every time, 11:30 a.m., every Sunday morning here to know if he's going to be in the lineup or not. So he's very frustrating here. And there's a time or two where he's been active and still didn't put up the points. I don't know if he'll be with Cincinnati next year. I think not. I know Joe Burrow wants him back here, saying you don't let players like this go, but I don't know where he's going to end up. A.J. Brown, I know, is going to be in Philadelphia. At least I'm pretty sure. You know, Philadelphia, by the way, were to lose first round here, and Brown causes problems again. He caused problems last year, already complained this year. Maybe not, but we'll see. I'm going to go Brown here. I think T. Higgins could be that guy. I do think Craig T. Higgins could be that guy. I don't know where he's going to be. You know, what if he's with the Raiders and a rookie quarterback, or some other? You just don't know. Too many unknowns here. If you were to tell me, guarantee me, if Craig came down, Higgins will be with Burrow and Chase next year, I might change my mind. But you can't do that, and I don't think he is going to be. So I'm not going to take that chance. Give me Brown.
No, I mean, Cincinnati, they're probably going to take a defensive player, I would guess, in the draft because the defense has been so bad. But in the second round, you could see Cincinnati taking this high-end receiver and, just putting him next to Chase and then hoping in 2 years the guy is exactly like T. Higgins and not having to pay the money. You could see that happening. Okay, so one wide receiver trending up at the end of the year and one trending down. Xavier Worthy trending up for the Kansas City Chiefs, starting to come along a little bit. Marvin Harrison trended up for about 2 weeks this season, very early on, and then really didn't have the season that everybody thought that he would. George and I actually debated his draft position this past year, which was probably higher than George remembered. 187 points for Worthy, 179 for Marvin Harrison. But there's always that tell-to-tale, George, that sometimes first-year wide receivers in the NFL don't click. I mean, is this the case? Because if it's just the first year, like Jackson Smith-Njigba, as an example, Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a star next year.
I mean, both of these guys had trouble with chemistry with their quarterbacks, right? The difference is Worthy seemed to get it with Mahomes the last month of the season. We have not seen it with Harrison all season long. Listen, and maybe that changes during the offseason where they'll work together. Theoretically, they'll work together a whole bunch with Harrison with Murray and Worthy with Mahomes. I trust it with Mahomes more. Worthy's that deep guy. They use Worthy in all different kinds of sets here, whether it's running the ball to the backfield, deep passes here. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think I would go with Worthy right now. I think Harrison is the better talent. I do, but I didn't like what I saw with Harrison and Murray. And like I said, Murray, his downfield passing is just not very good, and no chemistry with Harrison whatsoever here. They weren't even on the same page. I don't even think they were in the same book half the time here. I said, Craig, this is a weird one, but I'm going to go with Worthy. Give me Worthy and Mahomes.
What's a book? What is that? A book? Book? Never heard of that.
Yeah, they used to talk about this in school.
Open up a book? Yeah. All right, let's get to the final wide receiver comparison. This one probably is a no-brainer also. George Pickens, 163 fantasy points. I mean, let's assume, maybe George is going to say you can't assume Russell Wilson is back. I think he's probably going to be right and throw that at me. But if it was Russell Wilson, this would be easy for Pickens. I don't know what happened to Jalen Waddle. I don't get it, George. I don't understand it. It's back to Waddle being what he was several years ago, where he had 1 million catches and no yards. The Dolphins are not throwing the ball down the field anymore. But yet, George, they gave Waddle a ton of money too. To do what? I'm not sure. Just give me Pickens. I'm just going to close my eyes and just take the guy on the left here because, and I'm a keeper guy with Waddle too forever. I thought he was going to be fantastic. He was great in college, but I don't know where the Dolphins are headed, man. Tua can't play again this week. It's really disappointing.
I don't have much to add to what you said here. I'm going to go with Pickens as well. Even though, like I said, I think there is a chance that Pittsburgh, that quarterback is not on the roster right now. I said they lose tomorrow. They lose, let's just say to Houston on the first round here. They may move on from Wilson and Fields. And by the way, if it was Fields, I'd go to Waddle. Right? Because Fields and Pickens didn't click at all. Yeah. It was really Russell Wilson that made Pickens all of a sudden really look really good here. But I think Pickens is the better wide receiver. So Pickens is the guy I want.
All right. So let's take a look real quick at the draft order in 2025, which is now. Okay, got that right. Patriots have the number 1 overall pick, followed by Tennessee. Tennessee's a tough one, man. If they win, and I think they could, they're going to blow a great shot at one of the top 2. I'm worried about them making the wrong decision on Sunday. Look at all these 3-win teams, and the 4-win teams can jump right into the fray here. So on FanDuel, Shedeur Sanders is the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft, and I think we're going to get, in my opinion, we're going to get 3 quarterbacks in the first round. You see Jackson Dart there from Ole Miss, who just helped himself in the bowl. And I don't know, maybe Sam or George, I don't know if they agree. I think Milroe may end up being a first-round pick from Alabama too. So maybe – no, I know Cam Ward's definitely a first-round pick. So it's Sanders, Ward, Dart is going to be a first-round pick, and then maybe Milroe. I think they'll set that total on FanDuel at 3.5 quarterbacks, George. But you can't go wrong with either the number 1 or number 2 overall pick as far as a quarterback is concerned.
I would take the over mainly because if you take a quarterback first round, you get that extra year. You get the 5th year, which I think is so important with these quarterbacks under the contract there. So give me the over on that. Should be a fun draft, by the way.
Yeah, we'll take a quick time out. Be back with more fantasy sports today next.
They let the guy run the practice and leave the building, have a press conference, and then you fire him on a cell phone call while he's in the car. Shame on you, Sacramento. You haven't been good since Chris Webber, White Chocolate, Lottie Divac, Corliss Big Nasty Williamson, and obviously Rick Alleman as a coach. No one wonder why you've been a joke for the last quarter century.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The early line. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Back to fantasy sports today we go. Craig Mish along with George Kurtz here with you on the show. Now, normally this time, each and every week for the past, 18 weeks. Wow, have we been doing this 18 weeks in a row? That's crazy. Normally, George and I, in fact, I want to say one thing. I missed 1 week of, I did 26 weeks in a row in 2023. This past year, I missed 1 week on fantasy sports today. I was so proud of doing the streak, but my streak ended because I had a flood in my house that knocked out my modem. That's why I missed fantasy sports today the one time this year. But anyway, I digress. We usually do bold predictions, but this week we decided to do New Year's resolutions. So some fantasy resolutions from my guy, George Kurtz. George, take it away.
Fantasy resolutions, which is kind of ironic, by the way, because I don't do New Year's resolutions. I do them. Who listens to those things anyway? All right, do you really do them? I'm not going to eat candy. I'm not going to drink. Whatever. I'm going to go to the gym. Don't do them. All right, but and even these, by the way, all these resolutions I'm bringing up here, I've probably known for years, yet I still don't do them. Number one, and I tell myself, this is, by the way, for every sport that I play fantasy, football, baseball, hockey, I will not play in as many leagues. It's not because I don't want to play in them. All right, I do want to play in them, but it's so hard to keep up with the fab because, let's just say you play in 10 leagues. Fab runs Tuesday nights. Oh, no, it runs Wednesday nights. It runs at 4 o'clock. It runs overnight. You keep track of everything, of when to put your bids in. That's what drives me insane. Not to mention, if you're playing in so many leagues, yeah, you get that 11:30 Sunday morning. Oh, so-and-so's not playing it. That's a surprise. Oh, now you got to go look this stuff up. What league did I have? It can drive you insane. So I always tell myself that I'm not going to play in as many leagues. But you know what happens? The leagues I'm in, if they're keeper leagues or they're dynasty leagues, well, I'm playing in those. And then even the ones that were, so-so, if they ask me back, I have a tough time saying no because you know what? Yeah, I do want to play. And if I can make the draft, generally I join the league. It's really that simple here. If I can't make the draft, well, that makes the decision easier for me. Then I can't. But I say it most years that I'm not going to play in as many leagues, and I do anyway. So we'll see. I think I was in 9 leagues this year if you don't count best ball. If you count best ball, then forget about it. It's like triple that. This is one that I definitely have to keep to heart here. I will draft the mobile quarterback. And I think this is sort of a 2-part resolution here. To draft the mobile quarterback, you're talking Lamar Jackson, you're talking Josh Allen, Hurts, Jaden Daniels, a couple of others, it means you're going to have to spend an earlier pick on a quarterback than I would like. So it's sort of two resolutions in one here, that I have to be willing to spend an earlier pick on a quarterback as well. Because all those quarterbacks I mentioned, yeah, I include Daniels in this, they're not lasting until round 7, 8, 9, which is where I generally would take a quarterback in one quarterback leagues. If you're playing in a super flex, I'll take quarterback in the first round. Don't have an issue with that. If you're playing a league where you get 6 points for a touchdown pass, I'll take a quarterback earlier. But if it's your normal 4 points, I have to be willing to do this, and I generally have not been through the years. I want to load up on my running backs and wide receivers, and I wait on a quarterback. I just don't think you can do that anymore. I think you have to take a mobile quarterback. You need those rushing yardage. They're just too valuable in today's game. The game has changed from when I was younger, all right, where you didn't have too many mobile quarterbacks. Now, every quarterback that seems coming out has to be able to run, or you can't succeed in the NFL here. My next, last resolution here, not to be afraid to spend my fab early in the season. I looked down all my leagues, and I actually did this. I still have, a decent amount of fab left in most leagues. And I'd say in my 9 leagues, probably more than half, or right around half in 2/3 of them, where I didn't spend my fab. And I guess because I keep waiting. It's almost like when you play baseball in an only league. You're saving that fab for that guy who gets traded. In baseball, in an only league, that can make sense. In football, there's a guy you want early on. I should not be afraid to go get it. But for the most part, I have been a little afraid. And I think that's a problem I have here. I can't be the only one, too. So I think I need to be able just open up a little. I'm not saying blow the budget, by the way, in week 3. But I shouldn't be afraid to bid what I think is going to be a winning bid. Not just a competitive bid, but a winning bid on a player I might need in week 3, week 4, week 5, whatever it might be here to go for it here. So this is Fantasy Sports Today. He's Craig Mish. I'm George Kurtz. Coming up in hour 2, we have our DFS Week 18 breakdown. We have our Saturday fantasy preview. We do have 2 games today, Cleveland and Baltimore, Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. And I'll be the first person to tell you, it's a tricky fantasy week if you're playing in any kind of league here. All right, so like I said, Week 18 preview. We got some DFS action here. Craig and I are going to go over all the games. A little buy or sell, our favorite game that we like to play here. To see if you should be buying or selling certain players here. Like I said, I'm George Kurtz. He's Craig Mish. Fantasy Sports Today. We'll be back right after this.
They let the guy run the practice and leave the building, have a press conference, and then you fire him on a cell phone call while he's in the car. Shame on you, Sacramento. You haven't been good since Chris Webber, White Chocolate, Vlade Divac, Corliss Big Nasty Williamson, and obviously Rick Alleman as a coach. No one wonder why you've been a joke for the last quarter century.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.